الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So as we continue discussing the book Bulugh al-Maram, and today inshallah ta'ala we'll be picking up from the chapter that the author rahimahullah he mentioned Bab Qada al-Haja, so matters that pertains to the adab, the etiquettes and mannerism in relation to the person fulfilling the call of nature. So amongst these hadith that the author rahimahullah mentioned, that you have mentioned hadith of Suraqa, and so we'll discuss this hadith of Suraqa and the ahkam that can be taken from it, and also the hadith that follows. تفضل.
Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. Hadith 91, narrated Suraqa bin Malik radiyallahu anhu. Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam taught us concerning manners of al-khalla, place of answering the call of nature, that we should sit on our left foot and keep erect our right foot. Reported by Al-Baihaqi through a ضعيف, weak chain of narrations. Hadith 92, narrated Iesa bin Yazdad from his father radiyallahu anhu. Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, when one of you passes urine, he should forcibly push out any urine remaining in his penis 3 times. Reported by Ibn Majah through a ضعيف, weak chain of narration.
So that's the hadith that the author rahimahullah mentioned regarding this discussion of Qada al-Haja. So he mentioned the hadith, 2 hadith that we'll be covering today. The first hadith will cover the first hadith, and then after go to the second hadith, as both hadith discuss 2 separate matters. So as for the first of those 2 hadith, he mentioned an Suraqa ibn Malik radiyallahu anhu قال علمنا رسول الله عليه السلام في الخلاء أن نأخذ على اليسرى وينصب اليمنى رواه البيهقي بسند ضعيف. So that's the first hadith that the author rahimahullah mentioned to us regarding of those matters pertaining to Qada al-Haja, toilet manners. So he mentioned the hadith of Suraqa bin Malik. Then so of those things that we'll normally cover, we'll discuss a sahabi if it be mentioned for the first time, and then also we'll have takhrij of the hadith. So as for the sahabi that is being mentioned, that is Suraqa ibn Malik ibn Ju'sham. So they mentioned that his name is Suraqa ibn Malik ibn Ju'sham, and they mentioned regarding that as for his kunya is Abu Sufyan. His kunya Abu Sufyan. They mentioned regarding concern of those who came to Medina and accepted his Islam and met the Prophet Islam, and then took his Shahada. They mentioned that he accepted Islam al-Fath, the year of the conquest of Mecca, and then that also he died, as mentioned here, that he died during the time of the Khilafah, a khilaf between the ulama regarding exactly when he passed away, rahimahullah ta'ala, of those who mentioned in the Khilafah of Uthman ibn Affan, and that was the year, the 24th year of the Hijrah, so the 24th year of the Hijrah, where he passed away during that time. And of those who mentioned, he died after the Khilafah of Muawiyah. So discussion different between the ulama as to exactly when he passed, but as for this sahabi, who's Abu Sufyan, Suraqa ibn Malik ibn Ju'sham, and as we mentioned, that considered to be the people of Medina and accepted Islam after Am al-Fath, so after the year of the conquest, that he accepted Islam. So as for the second matter of this hadith, that the hadith that the Prophet of Islam he mentioned that we were taught by the Messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regarding khala, regarding that we were taught, and it was clarified to us by the Prophet of Islam regarding matters relating to khala, regarding toilet manners. Then he mentioned of those things that the way in which they are to sit. So as for this hadith, he mentioned Rawahu Bayhaqi bisanadin ضعيف. That this hadith is narrated by Al-Baihaqi rahimahullah ta'ala, and the isnad he mentioned here, it is ضعيف. So as for this particular hadith, is narrated by Al-Baihaqi in his Sunan al-Kubra or Sunan al-Kabir. So Al-Baihaqi rahimahullah, he mentioned this hadith in his Sunan al-Kabir. So he collected a large book, Al-Baihaqi rahimahullah, that discussed many matters regarding a Hadith al-Ahkam. And also, so Al-Baihaqi rahimahullah, he mentioned this hadith, and the author, he references hadith to Al-Baihaqi. But then also he mentioned bisanadin ضعيف. So and also that the isnad, it is ضعيف. So as for the discussion regarding this particular hadith, regarding that he mentioned the hadith is ضعيف, and the reason why the hadith is graded as ضعيف, that they mention the reason regarding concern that, of those narrators that are said to be mubham. So they mention mubhamaini or mubhaman, that there's two narrators that is unknown to the narrator, that they mention Muhammad ibn Abdul Rahman, and also then also they mention regarding another narrator also who falls under the second, also who falls under this. So based upon this, that they mention the hadith is ضعيف, based upon those criticism of the hadith, based upon those criticism of the hadith. Sheikh Abdullah Fawzan, in his explanation of hadith, so they mention also that the other sort of hadith, they mention Al-Baihaqi, also this hadith, that it can be found in Tabarani. So they mention also the hadith in the Tabarani fi al-Majah al-Kabir. So the hadith is also found in other sources. So as also they mention the hadith that hadith in the Abu Bakr ibn Abi Shayba in his Musnad. So Ibn Abi Shayba, Abu Bakr ibn Abi Shayba, that is more renowned book, it is Al-Musannif. But also he has a Musnad, and they mention that this hadith is mentioned in this Musnad. A portion of that Musnad is in print, or the Musnad, a part of it is in print, or the entire thing is in print. And he cited here regarding that as a reference regarding this hadith being in the Musnad of Ibn Abi Shayba, Abu Bakr ibn Abi Shayba, that he mentioned a book that he referenced, a book called Matal al-Aliyah. So Matal al-Aliyah, a book collected by Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, that mention many sources outside Kutub Sittah. So this hadith is mentioned amongst those books, amongst those hadith within that collection. So I said overall, the hadith is considered to be ضعيف due to of narrators who are criticized. Sheikh Abdullah Fawzan, when he mentioned this hadith, he mentioned a point regarding just something. He mentioned that in the narration of Al-Baihaqi that is mentioned here, that mentioned concerning an na'qud, that we used to sit. So we used to sit ala al-yusra, we used to sit on our left side. He mentioned here that our left leg, or sit on our left side. He mentioned here regarding concerning that in the narration of Al-Baihaqi. So also the hadith in the this hadith in the Al-Baihaqi, that when he mentioned this particular hadith, that it mentioned the actual wording in Al-Baihaqi, it mentioned an na'tamid. So I mentioned that the word na'qud that we used to sit, mentioned na'tamid, that we used to somewhat rest on our left side. We used to rest on our left side, or brace on our left side. So it kind of somewhat a difference in wording. So the word, as he mentioned, so that's concerning something to be mindful of. So as we mentioned that ulama of hadith, that in discussing this hadith, at times they might highlight certain wordings that are somewhat, that maybe that Imam Hajar rahimahullah might use a wording that is not the wording found in the actual hadith, when go back to the original source. So of those things that they sometimes will mention, that the hadith, in verifying the hadith, that sometimes Ibn Hajar rahimahullah might mention the hadith, that as times he may summarize the hadith, and sometimes may drop certain words, but those words are important relating to the topic of being discussed. And at times that the hadith sometimes is mentioned a different wording from what is mentioned in the original source. So in this one, he mentioned regarding concern of this matter, that ya'tamid, that they used to rest on their left side, not that mentioned, because that na'qud, that na'qud, or na'qud, that they used to rest on their, that use concern that they used to sit on their left side. So he mentioned a difference in that wording of the hadith. So he mentioned regarding concern that if they said that they used to sit, I mean they used to be flat on the ground, which means concern the person be flat on the ground, that could lead to problems. So the word mentioned that that he used to somewhat rest, then that give a more, that hadith, that meaning seems more in line. But overall I mentioned the hadith is ضعيف regarding this particular matter, that Then the next matter they discuss regarding concerning that what can be taken from the hadith. So the hadith is discussing concerning of those ahkam or those adab of the person carrying out the call of nature. So the ulama discuss concerning al-i'timad ala al-rij al-yusra in the qada al-haja. That regarding concerning the matter that the hadith can somewhat is given the understanding that the way to sit while the person is carrying out the act of nature. So how the person should sit in carrying out the act of nature. This hadith can somewhat mention this particular way of how the person should sit in carrying out this act. So the hadith is ضعيف, but of the ulama who have used this hadith to say that regarding the position or the way that have been described in how to sit, that they mentioned it is mustahab to sit in this manner, to sit with a person that he will sit in this manner, so the person will somewhat pivot more to his right or rest on his right with his left head, with his left leg out. So they mentioned that of those ulama who mentioned something which is mustahab to sit in this manner. So they have mentioned regards, so that's concerning of this hadith regarding that matter. But I mentioned that the Shaykh mentioned regarding concern of those who may have take up this position regarding sitting in this manner is something which is mustahab based upon the hadith is as they mentioned tonight that they were taught this manner. So a form of instruction regarding the companions that they were taught to sit in this manner, that they were taught to sit in this manner. Most of the hadith is ضعيف. So based upon this, and the hadith per se would not, because it's a hadith to ضعيف, then a discussion between ulama, can one use it regarding matters regarding ahkam. As for ahkam al-shar'iyya, saying something is wajib, something is mustahab, then regarding concerning use of hadith to ضعيف, then it is not to be used. So hadith to ضعيف regarding ahkam al-shar'iyya, in saying something regarding passing a judgment on a act, saying it is something which is wajib and must to be done, or something is mustahab, then a person is required to have clear evidence that is authentic if it's by way of hadith. So this hadith is ضعيف. So to elevate or to consider this act or to pass the ruling on this act as being something which is mustahab, then that requires dalil that is thabit, that is authentic. And this hadith is not authentic. Then the ulama mentioned that, that the reason why some also of the ulama who can somewhat more inclined towards what the meaning of the hadith as to how one should position oneself in carrying an act of nature, the call of nature, that the person I mentioned that it is that sitting position that will make it easier for a person to remove off this waste, or this for a person if they sit, make it more easier regarding for a person to release what is within him. So they mentioned that so of those reasons that they mentioned, the Shaykh mentioned that because the hadith is ضعيف, or Shaykh Abdullah Fawzan hafidhullah ta'ala, that the hadith is ضعيف. So regarding concern that what it cannot be used as a evidence to say something is mustahab. Cannot be used as an evidence, the meaning of what he's saying, but to say the hadith is something that is mustahab to sit in this manner. Then he mentioned that if it has been accredited and advised by way of people who are medical doctors that sit in this way, it is somewhat beneficial for a person in carrying on an act of nature. It can be beneficial to make it easier for a person to release of this, of this while in this position. Then that's something that can be looked at. Then something that can be considered by way of it's something which is being advised medically. After the doctors will look at this matter and see it as something that it is maybe an advisable position for a person to be in carrying out this act or in doing of this act, then that is something that is based upon medical reasons. But by way of hadith, then there's nothing that is authentic saying the person should sit in this matter. So the person would not do so by way of it saying that it's a sunnah to sit in this matter, but the person says no, it is based upon medical research why they're doing this act. And the benefit is more for medical reasons, not so by way of the sunnah. I would say the sunnah on this matter spoke about this matter, but not with an authentic narration. So that we base upon the maslahah for a person, and you find that it's been mentioned the person that what we have the form, the type of the normal cubicles or toilet that we have today, that the person, if you sit flat on it, then it makes it more difficult for the person to remove the filth easier sitting in that position. So the sitting directly on the seat of the toilet, it makes it that that's not the most advisable way to sit in regarding the person carrying an act of nature. So they mention the person is crouched upwards, then it becomes easier for a person to release of this waste. So that's concerned the first hadith that is mentioned by the author, rahimullah, mentioned by the author regarding this matter. So I said that the hadith is ضعيف regarding the sitting position. Even some of the ulama might say it is mustahab, but the hadith is ضعيف, so it won't be considered to be a sunnah to do so. But if the person consider the advice based upon medical research, then that can be taken as a factor. That can be taken as a factor. The next hadith that is mentioned by the author, he mentioned an Isa ibn Yazdad رضي عنه, that he mentioned Yazdad an أبيه, and his father, قال رسول الله عليه السلام إذا بال أحدكم فلينثر ذكره ثلاث مرات. رواه ابن ماجه بسند ضعيف. So that is the previous hadith. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah have somewhat graded hadith before as ضعيف, and also you have done the same in this case. So at times Ibn Hajar rahimahullah will include a hadith that have been narrated upon the Prophet ﷺ regarding certain matters that are said to be ضعيف. So the persons are aware of this, that yes, there may be narrations on this topic upon the Prophet ﷺ, but the narration is not authentic. The narration is not authentic. And in most cases, he tried to give a hadith. So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, that he tries to stick to giving concerning a hadith upon the Prophet ﷺ regarding these various ahkam rulings that are being discussed. So I mentioned the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. I've mentioned the hadith mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ have said, إِذَا بَالَ أَحْدُكُمْ, if any of you urinate in the process of urinating, then a person should squeeze his private parts 3 times, or pull on his private parts 3 times, so to put pressure on his private parts. And he mentioned ثلاث مرات, to do so 3 times. Then he mentioned رواه ibn Majah. So they have mentioned regarding concerning this hadith, regarding concerning one, the Sahabi who have been mentioned for the first time was Isa ibn Yazdad. That I mentioned that, Isa ibn Yazdad. Of those who mentioned, that is Isa ibn Yazdad. So of those who mentioned, Yazdad, Farisi, Yamani. So a difference regarding concerning Yazdad or Izdad, a difference between those who have mentioned this name. Then I mentioned regarding concerning that, and then I mentioned that as for his father who is Yazdad or Izdad, then as we'll discuss, that the ulama they mentioned regarding concerning, the ulama have mentioned regarding this, they mentioned concerning that, as for the hadith, Imam Bukhari rahimahullah mentioned لا يصح حديثه, that regarding concerning the hadith is not authentic. Even though it is mentioned by Ibn Hibban in Al-Thiqat. So that's concerning the son was Isa, that Al-Bukhari rahimahullah mentioned لا يصح حديثه, that is a hadith, is narration, is a hadith, it is not authentic. But again, Ibn Hibban mentioned him in his book Al-Thiqat. But was mentioned of another matter to take into consideration, that Ibn Hibban in his book Al-Thiqat, that he has certain, a somewhat more easy approach regarding those that he mentioned in his book Al-Thiqat. So he might mention people who are criticized in his book Al-Thiqat, as he has certain guidelines that he follows regarding his book Al-Thiqat, that sometimes he may include narrator who is not per se known, but he'll still include him as in his book Al-Thiqat. So hadith or so narrators mentioned in the book of Ibn Hibban at times they need to be verified and checked, especially those that so at times need to be double checked. As for his father, as we mentioned regarding Yazdad or Izdad, that the ulama of Jarh wa Ta'dil, they have mentioned regarding concerning Abu Hatim Al-Razi rahimahullah ta'ala have said that this is father Yazdad, a discussion regarding is he a Sahabi or not. Is he considered to be a Sahabi, one who met the Prophet ﷺ, believed in him and died upon Islam? Does the person is considered to be that he falls into this category of Sahaba. So they mentioned regarding, so Abu Hatim mentioned, La suhba lahu, that he doesn't have, he's not considered to be of those who is considered to be a Sahaba. Wa hadithuhu mursal, and his narration is considered to be mursal, meaning concerned to know that is not direct upon the Prophet ﷺ. And also as mentioned, they criticize whether he is said to be a Sahabi. Ibn Hibban يقال إن له صحبة. Ibn Hibban mentioned يقال إن له صحبة. He mentioned it is said that this person Yazdad or Izdad, that is a person that is, can be considered to be a Sahaba. But he mentioned يقال. So give a kind of somewhat, not seems definite, but is something that is mentioned but not definite. Then also you'll find that others who have mentioned regarding concerning La Suhba Lahu, that is not considered to be of a Sahabi. So you find that the books of Jar wa Ta'dil, the books that as a general rule regarding that of those who are mentioned as Sahaba, whereby we are so knowing those who are said to be Sahaba, because that is important regarding looking of a hadith. So the hadith that the person that would narrate upon the Prophet ﷺ be a Sahaba, but is to verify the person that narrates upon the Prophet ﷺ is he considered to be, or she, is this person considered to be a Sahaba. So if I follow the Sahaba, those who are well known and it's established regarding their suhbah, regarding them being classed as a Sahabi. So that one is clear. Khulafa Rashid, Abu Bakr, Omar, Uthman, Ali, Abu Hurairah, Ibn Abbas, many. Then you have a next group of those who are said to be, that is, people may, that there's a difference regarding is this person a Sahabi or not. So in this case, we have that discussion. Yazdad, is he Sahabi or not? So you have some individuals who fall into that category where there's a discussion between ulama, of some that there's a discussion, but what have been verified is a Sahaba. And in some cases, that is a discussion, and then it is clear that he is not a Sahabi. So in this case, they mention regarding concern that, mimman nasa, to find many of the ulama who have clarified or taken the position that he is not a Sahabi. Amongst them, Al-Bukhari, Imam Abu Dawood, As-Sijistani, Abu Hatim, also his son, Abdul Rahman, Ibn Adi, and other than them, who all that is not from the Sahaba. And then you find that Ibn Ma'in, I've mentioned regarding Isa and his father, لا يعرف Isa ولا أباه, that Isa and his father is not known. I mean, consider them that so they don't have information about Isa and his father. But we mentioned that Ibn Hibban mentioned Isa in his book Al-Thiqat, even though there's not much information about him. As sometimes Ibn Hibban may include a person in his book Al-Thiqat with where there's not much information about him. So as for, so that's that regarding concerning the one who narrate the hadith regarding Isa and his father. So the conclusion that his father is not considered to be a Sahabi. So he narrated direct upon the Prophet ﷺ of the reason why they said the isnad is mursal, or there's a breakage in the isnad. So there's a weakness in the isnad, and the weakness is that of the weakness in the isnad, that there's a breakage in that where the person narrating upon the Prophet ﷺ did not meet the Prophet ﷺ. As for the reference for this hadith that they have mentioned regarding concerning this hadith of Isa, of something that just to highlight and to mention regarding this hadith, that in narration or in the checking of Sheikh Fahal, he mentioned an Isa ibn Yazdad and أبيه قال رسول الله عليه الصلاة والسلام إذا بال أحدكم فلينثر. So I mentioned, not most narration mention ta, and in this one it mentioned tha. So in most of narration they mention here that in one of Sheikh mentioned فلينثر yantur, he mentioned here yanthur with tha. So to verify regarding concerning what's the correct thing. So of that, the person have access to like a book which is maktut, which is the books that are manuscripts. Then one can verify this. And you have those books that are being printed in that format. So you find the books of the Sunnah, one of the Mashaykh, Nizam Yaqubi, one of the Mashaykh from Bahrain, who's involved in books and checking of books, that he at times will publish certain books in their manuscript form, in the old writing form style, that most people may not be able to read. But that's more for people like, high-level students of knowledge, especially Ilm al-Hadith, that they can benefit from these books as to see the originals, these manuscripts, and he has done it with others regarding Kutub al-Hadith. So he has done it for Bukhari, Muslim, and others. Also, other books that this have been done for, even Riyadh al-Salihin. He have done a manuscript print of Riyadh al-Salihin. But overall, that to us verify, is it tha or ta? Ta or tha? So they mentioned regarding concerning in the hadith, we'll go back to Ibn Majah according to the printed version. And this printed version, there's many concerning that of Isam Musa al-Hadi, one of the Mashaykh, who have done some work on Kutub al-Sitta or Kutub al-Arwa from Urdun, that he mentioned the hadith when he mentioned concerning his state, and Isa ibn Yazdad Yamani, عن أبيه قال رسول الله عليه الصلاة والسلام إذا بال أحدكم فلينثر بالتاء ذكره 3 مرات. So he mentioned with ta, not with tha. So as we said that Sheikh Mahir al-Fahl is of tha, while most other prints have ta, the ones that we have. And so, but something to be looked into or something to be investigated regarding ta or tha. As for the hadith, discussion regarding the hadith. So as for this particular hadith, that it is mentioned in the Ibn Majah, also the hadith can be found in Musnad of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Uqayli in his book Du'afa, Abu Dawood in his book Marasil, Ibn Abi Shayba, and others. So this hadith, it is found in of the more renowned books of hadith, Ibn Majah, and also Musnad. Other books that may be mentioned are books that are not books more so of that discuss particular areas of ilm al-hadith. Of those who mention Uqayli, or those who mention Marasil of Abu Dawood, those books discuss an aspect of ilm al-hadith, which is Uqayli, that discuss concerning al-Ruwat, and also that Marasil of Abu Dawood discuss a particular area of hadith regarding Marasil. So Marasil Abu Dawood, it takes the meaning of hadith afghar anqita, or that a hadith have been narrated by a hadith that have been narrated by a sahabi, that are narrated by a tabi'in upon the Prophet ﷺ. That's mursal. That's a common meaning that we use today, but there's a meaning of mursal of the ulama of old, meaning al-inqita. So there's a breakage in any point in the hadith, not just at the end or the start of the hadith, also of the hadith with from the start, the tabi'in. Then I mentioned regarding concern, as for the hisnad of the hadith, we mentioned here that the ulama have criticized the hadith, as we mentioned, that the ulama have criticized regarding Isa, unknown, and also his father, Yazdad, that they are already criticized as being a sahabi or not, his father. So mentioned that there's already some criticism on those narrators, that the hadith is somewhat rejected. So they mention also, addition to that they mention other, but those of the isna that show the concern the hadith is da'if. So they mention regarding concern ulama that who have all the hadith to be da'if. So you have other recent Zam'a ibn Saleh, who's also mutakallim fi. So he's also of those people that is spoken about, where the ulama have criticized him, or some of the ulama have criticized this narrator. So we have those reasons regarding the hadith. So we have the reason of the hadith being da'if, Isa, Yazdad, and his Suhbah. His hadith is also inqita', and also another narration, Zam'a ibn Saleh. So all these are reasons regarding the hadith being graded as ضعيف. Then I mentioned that أكثر علماء على تضعيفه. The majority of ulama all concerned that Zam'a ibn Saleh is somewhat weak. So based upon this, find a hadith that have been considered to be ضعيف. The hadith is as mentioned by An-Nawawi rahimahullah. So as mentioned by An-Nawawi, as he states, اتفقوا يعني أهل الحديث على أنه ضعيف. That so it shows regarding that, that this hadith is said to be ضعيف. And the Shaykh mentioned كما أنه ضعيف في السند وهو ضعيف في المتن. So the hadith is weak both from the position of the sanad, the narration, the narrators, and also by way of the matan. That also criticize the hadith by way of the matan, by way of the actual text of the hadith. So overall they discuss concerning that nathar is a person somewhat trying to still release from after in squeezing of his private parts. So the person in urinating, that and sometimes I find a person that may still try to squeeze or put pressure to see if there are still things that remain that I wish to squeeze out. So I mentioned that's this act. So I mentioned that this act, that ulama somewhat are advised against this act, but we have some people out of waswas who are troubled with concern, it's waswas, that they believe that there are still things that they need to get out of their urine that still remain, that they're trying to push out, and they could remain there for a long time and do this thing repeatedly. So of those who sometimes had, so of the ulama can somewhat caution against this, that for a person that believing that there's still thing that is to be released, so they're there trying to wait and putting pressure on their private area to see if that will be released. So that's the waswas of the shaitan. So you find that those people sometimes who's affected by waswas, that they're still waiting for something to come. So they have completed, they have stopped normal, but they're still in their mind that they believe that there's still urine that is still there to be released. So they are waiting, and they will do things to make it to help it to release according to them. So they mentioned an advice of a person that this act is not to be done because the person may be affected by waswas. But to my find certain cases, so the person normally regarding this act, when they finish and they know that when they're finished, normally they know that I'm finished and I've ended urinating. But you might find certain cases, especially concerning those who may reach of a certain age in their life, older in age, that at times some they may put a little pressure and still maybe and some will be released. So each person look at their situation as to how to approach, and approach it accordingly. So the person who has no issues, then not to put unnecessary pressure on himself. The person who has no issues, young, when he finish, he knows he normally finish, not to put pressure on himself, him or her. And a person who may be older in age and may know his situation, that at times he can still feel that there's something there and he needs somewhat to put pressure to release it, then that's suitable, that may be suitable for him. So that's concerning this matter regarding this hadith. Then the next thing to discuss regarding concern the person that the person trying to release what he thinks remain after urinating, that of this matter the ulama somewhat they believe something which is encouraged to be done. Some ulama say it is mustahab for a person to try to release what may still be there. So they mentioned that amongst the fuqaha, the Shafi'i and the Anabila give some permissibility or istihbab, that they encourage a person try to release what may remain based upon this hadith. But said to know that this hadith is somewhat ضعيف. As for the instruction that can be taken from the hadith, so as we said that I mentioned that a person does so 3 times. So I mentioned that the person should do so repeatedly 3 times. But so the hadith is weak, and by this, then the hadith is not to, that the hadith is weak. So not something that will make something will not be judged as an act to be mustahab. You will not deem that act to be mustahab because it's given us a method and how many times. So a format. So this format is not to be followed or is considered to be mustahab to be done. Some of the ulama will let you know that of this, it is something which is not mustahab at all to be done. And you have a discussion between the ulama that some mention regarding this person, that person doing this act, that some mentions the act of bidah, with a person trying to make himself so clean and to release everything that it could form, that then that at time we said could be an act of, could lead to other things. So if the ulama all that the person should not, but the person only that allow nature to take its course, as they say. When a person know that he has complete urinated, then he stop and he make istinja, and that's the end of it. But not to wait and apply and do things thinking in his mind that there's still remnants of urine to be released. So based upon this, so that's concerning this particular hadith. That Ibn Yasuf says some of the ulama says the act to be an act of bidah for a person to carry through on this, as it have left to issues with some. So that's concerns this. These are the hadith that the author rahimahullah mentioned regarding of those things that I mentioned. So you find that some of the ulama who somewhat have aligned or have taken some of these positions, but said the basis of it is that the hadith that cover these acts that we have mentioned, that they are weak regarding, sit in a particular way. If the person do so, then that's a personal choice, not by way of the sunnah, or the person might do so based upon what he thinks is medically or easier for him, then that's his choice. But a hadith regarding sitting in a particular position in a specified way regarding carrying out this act of nature, then the hadith is ضعيف. And the second matter regarding the person after urinating, that a person tried to so-called believe that he's trying to release everything. Then we said to know that some cases is not advisable to be done. When the person knows that he has end his urine, then he clean up and go. But if a person may be older in age, and sometimes a person when they're older in age, that they may still have remnants of urine in their system that may still need to be released, and that's by gentle squeezing, and it will go. So in those cases, each follow what is suitable to them without going over the top. So that inshallah ta'ala, that these are what can be taken from these two hadith regarding of the adab qada al-haja. So that inshallah ta'ala will end this segment or this session of the lesson. وبالله تعالى توفيق وهذه السبيل والآخر دعوانا الحمد لله آمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Yeah, done.